Hey folks, welcome back to the channel where we talk about the Beatles all the time. And we welcome back a special guest who's been on this channel and other podcast shows that I co-host several times. It's Luca Perasi. His most recent book is an essential reference book on Paul McCartney called Paul McCartney, Music is Ideas and the Stories Behind the Songs, Volume 1, 1970 through 1989. So it's covering the first 2 decades of Paul's solo career. Welcome back, Luca.
Thanks, Ken. I'm very happy to be back for another episode with you. So let's dive into the 80s, particular decade in McCartney's career, but interesting as well.
Yeah, we did an entire show on the 70s, and I thought that we would be a bit more specialized this time out and talk about really the first half of the 80s. And we do have to cover, of course, the end of Wings. Now, as you know, George Martin said to Paul McCartney that when he was about to record Tug of War, that he would rather it would be a solo album than a Wings album. So what I want to try to understand here is what was the reason why Wings ended? Was it as simple as this? Or should I say simple as that? Um, or was it far more complicated, the end of Wings? And I want to get your opinions on this because we know that in 1980, there were several rehearsals at Pugin's Hall with Wings, and they rehearsed quite a lot of material that ended up on Tug of War, Pipes of Peace, and Give My Regards to Broadstreet. And by the way, we're going to talk about what I call the McCartney-Martin trilogy, Tug of War,
Okay.
Peace, and Broadstreet. So let me get your take on this and first discuss the fact that George Martin suggested to Paul make it a solo album. Do you believe that that was the primary reason why Wings ended?
Well, no, I mean, when a band breaks up, it's always difficult to say there's one reason.
Mm.
I think it's, let me joke a bit, but it's kind of similar when you are breaking up with a fiance or in a romantic relationship. There's not one reason. So it's very hard to tell when things start to go wrong. So we know that the Japan incident was really a turning point, at least for me. And I think that Paul acknowledged this. Uh, it was a turning point because, well, we know that it's not really a clever move to go into a foreign country like Japan with this baggage. And so Paul said something along the lines like, well, probably was an unconscious move on my part because I wanted to end Wings to some extent. So I think that was the primary factor that led Wings to an end. The fact that Paul went to Japan so light-hearted makes me think about the fact that he wanted to go out somewhat, but he didn't know how. So that was for me very very meaningful. It's not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence. We don't know what could have happened with Wings if they were to go on tour on Japan. To me, it would have been a very successful tour.
Mm.
Then there were rumors about the rest of the world. Who knows? But anyway, this for me plays a role. I mean, the fact that they went to Japan and Paul was arrested certainly was a factor leading to the end of Wings, because what happened after was that he went on the market with a solo album.
Mm-hmm.
Wings rehearsed, as you were saying, in July and October 1980. And then Paul started new sessions, and George Martin came in and suggested something, but we don't really know if it was a suggestion by George Martin, if it was a discussion between them. It could have been a suggestion. Could have been that Paul said, "Okay, yes, that's a right moment to do it." So it's a combination of factors. I mean,
It just seems extremely complicated in a way, because if Paul
yeah.
had it in the back of his mind to end Wings after the bust in Japan, why did they rehearse in 1980? Why did they continue rehearsing?
I mean, the fact is that it's quite meaningful that this thing happened in Japan. I'm not saying that he was uh, planning to do this,
Hmm.
but it shows something. It means something. Then probably he wanted to have Wings on his side again, but he was not 100% committed. Was not 100% committed at that point.
Hmm.
So yeah, then George Martin came in, and maybe that was there was a conversation that made Paul think about it uh, further, and that was the origin of Tug of War, probably.
Yeah. I remember around the time the Tug of War came out, there was an interview that Paul gave where he was talking about how Linda said to him, you always wanted to record a song with Stevie Wonder. Call Stevie Wonder. You always wanted to get Ringo on your record. Call Ringo. You always wanted to get Carl Perkins. Call Carl Perkins. So I think maybe that was something that maybe planted a seed in the way that Tug of War turned out.
Yeah. Oh, also Paul said something like that he felt a little bit restricted with the band
Uh-huh.
because of this mainly. So the fact that having a band uh, meant that if you do something outside the band, then people start talking and say, okay, Paul is not anymore with Wings and stuff. But it was not that clear because we don't have an official date of Wings disbanding.
Hmm.
The fact is that when Danny Lane left in April 1981, there was a note on Club Sandwich that said that Danny has left, but no official announcement really about Wings disbanding,
Hmm.
even though it was quite clear that without Danny would have been really difficult. And I remember during the Tug of War promotion, someone asked Paul, "Wings are no more," and he said, "Disbanded" or something, and he said, "Well, sort of." So it's a strange, way to say yes, but no at the same time. So it was really a difficult process to go out of Wings.
Do you think, and it's difficult to answer, but when he recorded what became McCartney 2 and released it, was that a red flag of some kind as far as
I
Wings?
think I think that Wings at best could have. Uh, well, I mean, there's another factor that we cannot overlook. That is John Lennon's death. I mean, that is another factor to me that made Paul think that uh, he needed something different. He needed something different. So I could not see really Paul with Wings uh, for another decade and stuff. Can you imagine Wings during the 80s? I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure. So it probably, if the 80s, 1980 tour would have been very successful, then Wings could have be with Paul again. I don't know, maybe for a couple of years, but then the musical environment of the 80s was really different. So I think in the end, things went for the best for Paul doing a solo career in the 80s, even though it was not easy, but I think it was time, in my opinion.
I also think that with John's death, Paul decided that he wasn't going to tour for a while. And as
Yeah,
much as I look at Wings as really a very collaborative effort creatively, a big part of the reason why Paul formed Wings was that it was a vehicle to play the music live. And if you're not going to go out live, at least for an
exactly.
extended period of time, then the band's going to be, in limbo in that regard.
Exactly, exactly. So after John was killed, yeah, there were fear that something similar could have happened. You start thinking the worst things. So definitely for Paul would have been really difficult to go out and touring as before. So that's another fact that we have to consider when we think about the end of Wings. So then, for Paul, making music is very important. So having a band and rehearsing and stuff is part of the process. Is part of his life, his daily routine. So
Mhm.
you call your mates and you go rehearse. So, but anyway, I mean, the outcome, Tug of War, is one of the best albums that he ever did. So we got to be happy.
No doubt about that. I'm also reminded of the fact that, I've interviewed Lawrence Juber many times, and he certainly is of the opinion that Wings wasn't just Paul's band, it was Paul and Linda's band. And James had been born in 1977, so the family was larger, more to take care of. And but Paul always found a way to bring the kids on the road with him. So, but I'm sure that that also could have been a factor as well.
Yeah, yeah, sure, family, and then you go. Uh, Maybe you're 40, you start thinking about leading a little bit different life. Then when Paul approached 50, then he reversed back to touring. But anyway, it's another story. I mean, it makes sense. It makes sense anyway. Also to get back on the road, and at the end of the 80s, after uh, so long with the Beatles legacy and stuff, but we will talk about it.
Hmm. Yeah, so let's talk about Tug of War. Go right to the beginning of Tug of War. Um, you do say in the book, and I remember reading about this around the time we heard about Tug of War. I always love reading about stuff that was unreleased or might have been released. Stuart Copeland worked with Paul,
Mhm.
and there was an unreleased song called All the Love Is There, which in your book you say Copeland said was some boring pop ballad. So I love learning about that. You say that George Martin said initially Paul gave him a tape of about 14 songs on it, and he told Paul four were great. And
Yeah.
Paul said, four? Like just four? And of the other two, six need a lot of work, and the other four you could just throw away. And I have read that Martin in particular didn't like Boyle Crisis and unbelievable experience. But it just goes to tell you that George Martin's one of the few people who could say to Paul, if he feels that his work isn't up to par, he'll tell him.
Yeah. Well, the fact is that when you work with Paul McCartney, there are, I think, at least a couple of aspects that you got to consider. The first is that is the best composer ever. That's undisputable. The second is a personality. So incredible composer, incredible man. I mean, there's a lot of things to say about Paul. Important personality.
Mm.
So I think the best thing with Paul is to be honest, and then it comes to the other half, uh, the personality of the other half. So in this case of George Martin, I mean,
Mm.
and George Martin was a man who was a very gentle man. He knew how to say things to Paul, but in the end, I mean, if you gotta say this song is not good, you gotta say it.
Mm.
Then at the opposite extreme, there's someone like uh, you know, what's the name of the producer of Chaos and Creation now?
Nigel
It's
Godrich.
Nigel Godrich, sorry. Then on the opposite extreme, there's Nigel who used completely different manners
Mm.
for, in his relationship with Paul, and it was difficult. So for Paul, is better maybe to approach him in a different way. But in the end, you gotta say, okay, these songs are not good. So come on, you can do better. And that's basically what George Martin did and said, and it took out the best from Paul. That's the truth. You
Hmm.
know, you mentioned these two titles, Boy Crisis. Well, it's a fun track, uh, but probably on an album would have been a little bit out of place. An album like Tug of War, then it depends which kind of thing you want to do. Maybe it was a good song for Wings to me,
Uh-huh.
but maybe less in a context of an album like Tug of War.
And it's hard to dispute George Martin given his track record and everything. He learned the art of diplomacy, and he had to learn that certainly during the Beatle period. So he knew
Yeah,
how to handle Paul. But every fan that's out there likes different aspects of Paul's career and different styles of music. So some songs that you might consider to be garbage, some fans actually really think is very good or interesting. So it's a very subjective thing. But I think certainly in the case of what worked for Tug of War, what fit the style and the production, George Martin was spot on.
yeah,
So yeah. Um, you say that in recordings at Air Studios in Montserrat, February 3rd through March the 2nd, there was an unreleased version of No Values. So it's always interesting to me, and certainly it's brought up in your book, all these songs that Paul worked on years ago that surfaced many years later on future albums. But yeah, and Wings did rehearse No Values anyway. And then
yeah.
there was also Denny's song written by Denny, left unused. Um, there's an unreleased song here that I never heard about, recorded at Air in London, called Any Younger.
Yeah.
You know anything at all about that song?
No, never heard it. These are just titles, but I mean, it's worth mention. Even we only know the title.
Right.
Who knows? One
There,
day.
there's titles of songs that I run across, especially in the reference book Eight Arms to Hold You,
Yeah.
Chip Madinger and Mark Easter. And I was just looking at this particular time period when Wings rehearsed and they were about to work with George Martin, because initially it was going to be a Wings album. And they came up with titles like Rock and Roll Rodeo,
Hmm.
Ecology of the World, Good Morning Song, New Orleans Jam, Ballroom Dancing was in there. And again, All the Love Is There, the
Yeah.
song Stuart Copeland worked on with him. So you don't know anything about those songs, right?
No, except for No Values because it was included in a couple of unofficial records, and it was a very nice version. I like the Wings version of No Values.
Hmm.
It's very nice to me. There's a more bluesy feeling, but it works. So it could have been good for Wings as a track.
That also explains why it works so well in Broadstreet with that kind of band.
Yeah,
It's a rock song. So
yeah,
it fits Wings very well. Um, I got to tell you, didn't know about this, and now I wish I could hear this song. There was another song with Michael Jackson, "Remember This Night."
Yeah,
They wrote
apparently there's a third track. Uh, well, to me, it was a seemed to me a quite reliable source, so I decided to quote also this song. Difficult that we are going to hear this, but who knows? Maybe in the far future there will be something more.
couldn't have been on the Pipes of Peace reissue, huh? Oh, anyway, would love to hear that because I think those two sounded so great together. Same with Stevie Wonder. Also, the song Tug of War was recorded at Air London on December 16th, 1980, which makes it the first song taped by Paul after Lennon's death, you say.
Well, this is something I think I put a note because there's a conflicting recording dates between
Right.
what we knew from the Eight Arms Who Hold You book and the archive collection. So maybe it was a combination of two versions. Who knows? Maybe they retained uh, some parts from the first recording. Who knows? So if it was recorded on the 16th of
Right.
December, that's quite meaningful because that means the first song recorded after John's death.
Right. And the other studio was Park Gate Studio that you said the Tug of War Deluxe Edition says was recorded.
Yeah, it's quite a there's quite a lot of conflicting information also about studios because they started recording at Air Studios, but at the same time using Park Gates, which was closer to Paul's house in Sussex. So at some point he switched to Park Gates, but it's very difficult without official documentation to know exactly which songs were recorded where. Anyway, I try to put all the best information and all the sources together in the book.
Right. Now, maybe you can clarify something here because it's so important to know the timeline here with John's death. But it was always my understanding that Paul recorded Rain Clouds the day either right before he heard about John dying or right after John dying. I actually thought it was the first song after John's death.
Yeah, but it seemed to me that the day after John was killed, they recorded just overdubs for Rain Clouds.
Okay.
That probably was recorded the day before or a couple of days before. What we know for sure, because there's an interview of mine with Paul Robinson, the drummer. He took part in the recording of Ode to a Koala Bear that happened in the afternoon of the December 8th
Right.
in London. And so that is the last song that Paul recorded when John was still alive, which is quite, goosebumps,
Mm.
uh, when we think about it. And that's for sure. So I don't know the exact date of Rain Clouds, probably the day before, but the day after they recorded overdubs. I don't think Paul strummed any guitar or sang anything during that session. He wanted to go there because there was it was booked, and so for him it was kind of a relief to be with George Martin, with Geoff Emerick, and all the other people around, and not being stuck at home thinking about what happened
Right.
in New York. I mean, I think it was criticized for this. I think he did the right thing to go to the studio and try to distract a bit from the terrible news. I would have done the same thing,
Yeah.
probably.
Sometimes work is the best therapy.
Yeah,
And like you said, having George Martin and Jeff Emmerich there, I'm sure was a big help.
yeah,
Um, so Rain Clouds, the recording of Rain Clouds could have been on December 8th, and then they overdubbed it the next day.
yeah, yeah,
So Rain Clouds and Ode to a Koala Bear were worked on December 8th then.
yeah.
Okay. What's That You're Doing? Added Stevie Wonder's backing group, Wonder Love, and Denise Williams is actually in there, which I didn't realize. Here Today had some famous classical musicians playing on it, including Jack Rothstein, who actually played the violin on Within You, Without You, and I Am the Walrus. And John Kelly engineered the session, assisted by Renata Blauel, who was Elton John's wife at the time.
Yeah.
Interesting stuff. I always like hearing how someone from the Beatle past is playing on a McCartney record. Usually a classical musician.
Yeah.
Ballroom Dancing used the voice of Peter Marshall, who was the host of the BBC talent show Come Dancing since 1949. The narration from him. Well, I can tell you then what, and it's ready. I'm sorry. We're starting with the first of 5 dances in this competition. That's the cha-cha-cha. It's taken directly from one of the shows.
Yeah.
And the song also featured Jack Brymer from the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra, who played first clarinet between 1947 and 1963. And he played a clarinet glissando
Yeah.
in the song. He also played on A Day in the Life.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of connections and references to the Beatles past. But anyway, these are session men, very trusted and incredible session men. So, I mean, it was quite, I think, normal to use this kind of classical players and players and session men for having this kind of contribution. So, but it's nice to hear
Okay.
to see these names back.
Okay. I apologize. I'm losing my camera at the moment, so I'm going to
Yeah.
on here, but I'll just keep on talking. Here I am. Okay. We continue with Dress Me Up as a Robber.
Hmm.
Made up of 3 parts, you write, the riff, the verse, the middle 8 flamenco style guitar on it. But what's interesting about this, for those of us who like to keep track of all the performances Paul's ever done, that on September 25th of 2013, Paul performed Dress Me Up as a Robber in Los Angeles during Shakespeare's play, The 2 Gentlemen of Verona.
Yeah.
With the course of Simply Shakespeare, which was an annual charity event on stage since 1990, organized by Tom Hanks and Rita Wilson. Paul played Eglamour on stage and also performed several songs. Live and Let Die, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. I
Yeah.
standing there, but this is all interesting because I never knew about this show. Let It Be, Sergeant Pepper, and The End, and he was accompanied by Jackson Browne's band.
Yeah. Who knows if I don't know if in the case of Lucy in the Sky, if it was just a band backing and or he was singing as well. I don't know, but anyway, it's interesting information. There's no recording of this thing, unfortunately. And so, some reason, Dress Me Up as a Robber popped in during the show, and so it was a nice piece to add in the song entry.
I love hearing about this stuff, these one-off things. The only time that Paul ever performed certain songs. And I'm sure there's lots of fans that would love for him to do Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds in concert, and he did it here.
Yeah,
Interesting. Unreleased songs that you mentioned, which many of us have heard. We already mentioned Ball Crisis, Unbelievable Experience, Seems Like Old, which I think was a really good song. Should have been
seems like Colton's. Are you talking about? Yeah,
Give Us a Chord, Roy.
Mhm.
Juggler.
Well, Juggler, yeah, it's a nice piece. I mean, I think we have to, to acknowledge that Paul is really good at composing these little jingles and stuff. I mean, it's not easy when it comes to jingles. It's a form of art in itself. You gotta be very, clever and identify the right instrument, having a good riff. It's difficult, but I mean, this juggler theme that he uses for all the NPL
Right.
videos and stuff is very nice. If we just analyze this as a piece on its own, it's a nice atmosphere. Yeah,
It's for a specific purpose.
yeah.
Okay. You talk about Say here, and that during the recording of Say, the tape was missing.
Hmm.
It was found at Abbey Road, and that actually gave Paul the idea behind the plot of Give My Regards to Broadstreet.
Yeah, he told a different story about the inspiration of Broadstreet, but definitely, I mean, it's a coincidence, um, quite incredible coincidence.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so who knows which is the truth? Probably, as often is the case, it's a combination of facts. He spoke with Chris Thomas about what happened to the Sex Pistols and stuff, and maybe there was something that happened for Say that you know made him think again about the old story and provided the inspiration for Broad Street. That's a that's a that's a nice way to invent something. You know, you look around you, what happens, and you got an idea.
Right. It's also a good
For
way.
film.
Regarding Say, you're right. In the early stages, Michael Jackson took the song to keyboard player Bill Walford, the creator of the celebrated intro for Billie Jean, and he contributed substantially to the arrangement. Nathan Watts played the bass on the song. When it was
Yeah.
brought to Paul, he liked the feel of it and kept it in. Keep Undercover. I think it would surprise a lot of people, was the first song that Paul worked on with George Martin during these sessions, the Tug of War, Pipes of Peace songs. And
Hmm.
you also say the basic track was recorded at Air Studios in London, again, December 7th and 8th,
Yeah,
1980.
it seems so. For sure, Paul said it was one of the first things, or the first thing that they attempted with George Martin. So definitely, it goes back to December 1980, which unfortunately is a month that we all know why is so important in the music history.
Sure. Yeah.
He,
Okay.
he, he had uh, he had quite a backlog of songs at the time.
Usually does. There's an outpouring of creativity from him all the time. As far as the man, you say, was worked on by Michael Jackson's entourage, but the man was worked on by Paul and George Martin.
Yeah, basically that's what they did.
Yeah, and even though I've heard about this many times, you can confirm the reason why it was pulled as a single was because of Paul's drug bust at Heathrow Airport at the time, and he didn't want,
Makes sense.
you know,
I'm not I'm
yeah,
not sure 100%, but it makes sense because I remember that in the early 84, even in Italy, radio stations started to play The Man quite a lot. So I was surprised to hear a track that was not officially a single, but it was I remember it was early 1984, but nothing materialized. So radio stations were informed or received copies, who knows, um, of the man, and then it was not a single. To me, it could have been another good success. I like the song. Uh, it took me a while, I admit, to appreciate the song. For many years, I was not a fan of this song. And then it came, I remember I met a musician many years ago. He said, well, you cannot really talk badly about this song. This song is incredible. And it just put me in the mood to, listen to it with a different approach. And I must admit, it's a very nice song.
I've always loved it. To me, the most important thing is the melody and the arrangement, and the words are good. And the chemistry between Michael Jackson and Paul McCartney was always great. For some people, it's a little too sugary and too sweet. And I understand that. But I really think it was a missed opportunity because it would have easily been another top 10 hit for the two of them. So,
Well, if this is sugary, there's the other side. Say is a funky track. I mean,
yeah.
To me, it's an incredible track. No matter what some could think or say about it, it's an incredible track. And apparently, the music is all by Paul, because Michael contributed with the lyrics, but
Right.
the music is all by Paul. Well, not easy to come up with this kind of track. It's very 80s, but at the same time, it's so good. It's
Mhm.
so good. So to me, well deserved number one spot in the US.
I think it would have hit number one in some countries.
Yeah.
Um, Average Person. Not sure whether it's Ringo or Dave Maddox on drums.
Sorry.
With the song Average Person, you say
Mm-hmm.
we're uncertain as to whether it's Ringo or Dave Maddox on drums.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The only thing that uh, we know is that Paul said that Ringo played on two songs on Tug of War, and since Ringo is just on one song, uh, probably the second is Average Person. There's another little detail, because during the interview he said we're finishing this second track, and the interview was around I don't know, July 81 and stuff. So that's uh, that's a recording date for overdubs of Average Person. So that makes me think Ringo could be on this song. And to me, it's his drum style. So I'm quite convinced that Average Person has got Ringo on, but who knows? There's a lot of production on this song, so difficult to really hear well the basic track, because there's a lot of other things
Yeah.
in the arrangement.
Well, when Paul said that about Ringo playing on two songs, he probably didn't know at the time that Average Person was going to wind up on Pipes of Peace. And
Yeah.
it is said, and you have it in your book, that originally Average Person was going to follow the song Tug of War, the way that Take It Away did. And I could hear that. They both blend so well coming out of Tug of
Yeah,
War.
if you just hear the last notes of Tug of War of the orchestra, it's basically the riff of Average Person, just slowed in tempo. So rather the same riff, slow, and then just try to listen to Tug of War and the ending, and you can hear the connection.
I can hear it. Those notes that da da
Exactly.
da 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 da. Very good. Through Our Love. The opening violins at the introduction spell out in Morse code. Peace.
Mm-hmm.
Never realized that.
Yeah, that's an information that was in the archive collection of Pipes of Peace. Well, also in this case, I've heard a lot of people, or at least some people, say that True Love is too sugary and stuff, too, too much orchestra and stuff, strings. I mean, it's an incredible song, incredible ending for this album, which is maybe it's not on the same level of Tug of War, but Pipes of Peace is an interesting album because it tried to experiment a bit. There's three tracks which
Mhm.
are quite experimental. So, well, in the end, it's a blending of fine pop songs and some experimental tracks. But the ending, to me, it's an incredible track, Cam. I mean, I've always been in love with this track, and I can't stop. I can't stop. It reminds me a lot of good things from way back.
Right.
Remember, for some reason, I bought the album when it came out in October '83, but for some reason, each time I listen to uh, Through a Love, it reminds me the summer of '84. I remember I was listening to the album a lot still after months. And for some reason, to me, it's got this, you know, very summery feeling. There's a quality in the melody, in the arrangement that brings me back to that summer when I was younger.
Hey, you don't have to sell me on Through Our Love. I think it's one of the greatest love songs he's done in his solo career.
Yeah,
And actually, I have four wedding songs when I got married, and Through Our Love is one of them. So there's one from each Beatle, and the one that I picked from Paul was Through Our Love. And just the very positive message that's in it is just wonderful. And sometimes when you hear that positive stuff from Paul, I tend to think of the spring and the summer, and
yeah,
it seems
yeah.
to
It helps. It's something that helps.
like
It's
with
got a
you know
there's a I think there's a light in this song. That light of, well, a feeling of positivity, which is undeniable. It's it's incredible the way that can affect you, the impact that this kind of songs can have on people.
right.
That's the magic of music in general, and in particular of Paul's music.
I agree. We can do things that they said were impossible. I love
Yeah.
the message in there. All right, let's move on to give my regards to Broadstreet. You write that originally the Fool on the Hill was going to be inserted in the medley of Yesterday and Here, There, and Everywhere. And other songs were recorded at the time, including Martha, My Dear, Here Today, Gloriana, which was a background music piece, and Hey Jude.
Mhm.
Interesting stuff
Yeah,
there.
this are rumors, but I think quite reliable. We all know that Ringo didn't want to play or didn't want to drum on any Beatles songs, and I can see why. We all can see why, and
Mm.
I think it's right on his part to say no thanks, because he knew that anyone would compare the drumming. Well, it's very difficult you know to replicate the same drum part if you just change a drum roll or something that people say, oh no, man, the original is better, blah blah blah, this kind of thing. So in the case of Paul, it's different because uh, they are his songs. So at some point you gotta, you know, play them again. I mean, no problem. Well, you change the arrangement, it's your decision. Uh, the arrangements of these songs are not uh, so different. There are differences, but I mean, with George Martin supervising this stuff, it's nice. Also in this new arrangement as this Yesterday, which is a little bit slowed down compared to the original, but I mean, it works in the context of the movie and the soundtrack thing, I think.
Okay. I love the
Well, you
version.
get to consider just a little anecdote from my side that when I bought Broadstreet, I didn't have Revolver, for example. So because I was just 14 something, so I just had I don't know, maybe the red and blue collection, or maybe only the red collection. So I never heard Revolver. So for me, the first version of Here, There, and Everywhere or Alan Rigby, for no one, were Broadstreet versions. So then after some months, I bought Revolver. I said, "Oh man, this is the original." So I can do a comparison now.
Right. I bring it up from time to time on this channel and in my podcast shows that we shouldn't just assume that everybody was brought up on the Beatles recordings first. There are second, third generations of fans who were brought up on the solo music, and someone like yourself heard these Beatles songs for the first time in Broadstreet. So
Yeah,
you have a different perspective altogether of these songs too, because of that.
yeah. Well, for in the case of Here, There, and Everywhere, I think the Broadstreet version is fantastic. I mean, there's no background vocals and stuff, so it misses a lot of elements from the Beatles recording, which is incredible. But it works in this new version. I think
Mhm.
I like it.
I love it. I love it as a medley here. Um, say what you can about Eleanor's Dream, which I think is a brilliant piece of work. But I always question how much of that was written by Paul and how much was written by George Martin.
This is difficult because I don't think at the time Paul uh, had uh, thought about classical music so deep as he did later.
Hmm.
So who knows? There's the melody of Eleanor Rigby and all the variations are there. Uh, the only thing I have mentioned in the book is that when Paul was talking about this piece, he used we have done this piece of music. So he used
Hmm.
we and not I. So that means to me that George Martin played certainly a big role in putting together all these things, because for someone like George Martin, it could have been very easy to
Sure.
put together, 10 minutes of this kind of things. He knows how to, to take a melody and transform this, and which kind of variations, all the instrumentations, all the voices, all this stuff. So for him, it's very easy. But maybe they just, collaborated or talked about it. Paul said something to him, what he wanted.
Mhm.
They had to fill a gap in the movie.
Right.
So it also depends on when they realized they needed this kind of music. Because if it was later in the process, probably George Martin had a more prominent role because they didn't have that much time to work together. Who knows? But anyway, it's an interesting thing. And the other interesting thing that I'm mentioning in the book is that uh, well, it's there's the intro to this track, when there's a Spanish guitar solo, and probably it's Carlos Bonnell
Oh,
with which Paul had composed that famous guitar concerto that is still unreleased, but it's definitely uh, his first collaboration with Paul goes back to Broadstreet. So that's another interesting piece. We're spoiling a little bit too much of the book now.
Mm.
No, I'm joking.
I wonder if there's any film footage of Paul and George Martin working on Eleanor's Dream. It could be that Paul wrote, the melody for it, and then George Martin just did the whole arrangement built around it. So I suppose we'll never know all the details about this, but it's a great piece of music. Um, Goodnight Princess, another favorite of mine, because I love the fact that Paul is as eclectic as he is, and it sounds like music that could have come out of the 30s or 40s, only an instrumental. I feel like it's something that would have been on Lawrence Welk's TV show here in the United States. But you actually say that Paul recorded a version with him on lead vocals, so there has to be lyrics for this song.
Yeah, that would be interesting. Although I like instrumental. I mean, it's so nice. I mean, it's an incredibly delicious melody. So I love it as it is, but it could be nice to have a comparison with a vocal version and say which is better. Who knows? We're still waiting for deluxe edition of Broad Street.
Been several years now since he put out a deluxe box set, so I hope there will be more. And also,
Let's wait.
what's that?
No, let's wait and see. That's what the only thing that we can do. I hope that they don't want to stop the series. So
Yeah, well, the solo catalog, the box sets have been kind of slow the last year or two, few
yeah,
years. So
yeah.
we'll see. We're going to end on "We All Stand Together," which I think not only is a brilliant piece of music and incredible production and arrangement from George Martin there, but I think it would surprise a lot of people that this was recorded before Tug of War.
Yeah, it took nearly 4 years to release this track. Also, in this case, there have been a lot of you know ungracious comments about this kind of music, and we all stand together. It's a long road from I don't know, you name it, Revolver or Sergeant Pepper 2. We all stand together, the Frog Song and stuff. I mean, it's a completely different perspective. I mean, it's a children's song. Uh, what's wrong with that? Uh, it's a incredibly gorgeous melody. You hear the demo, and it's an incredible piece because there are all these parts uh, already in his mind, perfectly built. You know, you got to be a genius to do this kind of things. It's not really easy to understand musical harmony and the way all these things work, and then transform it into a Hollywood-like production as Well Sent Together is. I mean, it's a nice song. I mean, there's nothing else to say. I don't see any criticism to do. Paul is capable to do different things, and he likes to do different things. So he can do rockers like Helter Skelter, and he can do Well Sent Together. There's no McCartney that does only one of the two things, or three, or four, or 10. You know, there's no McCartney. McCartney's all these different things. You know, that's it. That's the best way to understand this artist and to enjoy his output. Then you can, maybe you prefer Paul number one, or Paul number two, or Paul number three. I like the combination of all Pauls.
I couldn't have said it better. I've always said that he's arguably the most eclectic musician that we've ever had. He's written in so many different musical styles, and the only way you'd know that is by really studying all of it. Although you do get quite a lot of it just from the Beatle years. But no, he's really all over the place. And how can anybody be critical of a song like We All Stand Together? Because it's for animation. It's like you said, it's a children's song. It's like comparing what a rock star would do with one of his classic rock songs and something a rock star would write for a Disney film. You know,
Mhm.
it's two completely different worlds, you know.
Yeah.
So and Paul just masterfully did that, and you got to give George Martin a ton of credit too. Just the ideal producer for him in this kind of situation. I also love uh, Tropic Island Hum, which is in the same ballpark as this. There was a great DVD that came out of Paul's animated collection with these shorts, animated shorts,
Yeah.
which We All Stand Together, which is part of Rupert and the Frog Song, and another piece called Tuesday. And it's
Yeah.
all brilliant stuff. It's just another side, another dimension to Paul McCartney altogether. And I'm looking forward to High in the Clouds when that comes out, because that's going to be a full length feature film.
Yeah.
So
I mean, you mentioned Tropical and Hum, and I challenge anyone to listen to Tropical and Hum and not humming the day after.
yep,
Just write me if you can do it, because I can't.
it's extremely catchy. It could have easily fit in a Disney movie, that song. So all right, so that wraps up our talk on the Paul McCartney George Martin trilogy. You want to remind everybody when we can expect volume two?
Okay, so at the moment I can confirm the date that I have given during the last month. So it should be around mid 2024. So it could be the first months of 2024. It could be mid 2024. Uh, to be honest, uh, the book is mainly completed, although I'm adding pieces of interviews and stuff. It depends from Paul's new album, because I think it's worth to wait until he puts out something new and then include it in the book as well, because otherwise it would be, I don't know, until 2023. Maybe the album goes out in 2024, and then we got a piece which is out. And I want the project to be uh, complete as much as possible. So that's the only thing I can say. I would like to wait for something new coming out from Paul, but I don't know. I don't know what to expect. Something will arrive, because we all know that he's recording or he has recorded. So it's not stopping putting out new music. We all know that now there's this Beatle thing
Mhm.
that probably will be out during the autumn. So, but maybe maybe he will surprise us with something new, as he did 3 years ago. Uh, so that's something I would love to have in volume two, the new album or the new project that he's working on at the moment.
And it sure would be nice if we could find out about It's a Wonderful Life. And if that's
Yeah,
ever,
that's another thing. From what I understand, I mean, he has written a lot of pieces. He talked about 30 pieces and stuff, that there were too many, and but we're not sure that, or if he's going to be the singer. Probably not, because probably that would be a different or a new uh, era, let me say, in his career, when he's writing for others, or he's writing the music, but is not the the singer or the artist. Who knows? There's not much. We don't know much about it. It could be. It's not something that we ever thought about, because Paul likes to be the composer and be the artist of his own music.
Right.
But at some point, he could switch to doing also this kind of things and just writing the music, and then having a cast of artists that sings and his songs.
Right.
That's it.
Well, the first 2 decades of Paul's solo career, he was amazingly prolific, but he's been that way ever since. So your next book is going to cover everything. So you've got 20 years in the first book, and you're going to have 30.
34, 35 years, something like that. Yeah.
That's going to be an awfully thick book, I would think, because you're going to include the classical music.
Yes, yes, sure. There's classical music, there's Fireman, there's Liverpool Sound Collage, there's everything he puts out. Also on the Fireman pseudonym and stuff. I mean, it's part of his discography. The only thing that is left out, but there would be a volume 3. I mentioned this somewhere about the collaboration and side projects. So that would be a smaller volume. But it would take time to gather all the information. Someone has done this work already for the 4 Beatles and stuff, but only dedicated to Paul as nothing. So I would try to put together all the best information. I have collected some new information quite recently about it. So, but let's do things step by step. So let's finish volume 2. Let's see what happens with Paul and stuff. There would be, I would fill some gaps with volume 2 with nice information that have never been out before. So I'm happy with the results so far. There's time to enrich it. So wait and see.
As many of my viewers here will know, I've had you're referring to Chris Engelhardt, who put out a book, Fully Uncovered, Beatles Fully Uncovered, which is the side projects of the Beatles, songs they produced, wrote for, or played on for other artists. So I just nice to see that part of Beatles history is being recognized more. It's a whole other universe to tackle, right?
It's another universe, and I think it makes sense to put these things on a different volume. Also in the case of McGear, I know that people say, well, it could have been a Wings stuff, but I mean, it's not part of the official discography. Right. And we got to consider this. At some point, you got to break down and you got to decide what you want to do. And with all the stuff that he has done, there are limits also to the number of pages. I mean, I want these books to be readable as well, in addition to be references books. So big books, but at the same time, you got to choose and make choices. I mean, when you go through the process of writing, and what is going in the book and what's left and for which reason. That's I think that makes sense.
Okay. Well, I want to recommend to everybody to make sure, if you haven't done so already, to get Luca's book, Paul McCartney, Music is Ideas. It's such an enjoyable read because it's packed with information about every single song that Paul's released from this time period, 1970 through 1989, the recording dates, the studios, who plays on each song, when demos were made for songs. Everything is all packed right here in this book. So we anxiously await volume 2, and I anxiously await the next time you're on my channel.
Yes, sure thing. Thanks a lot.
So thank you so much, Luca, for being here. And thanks to everyone for watching. And we'll see you next time.
Bye.